Hello, I am Wallas, the Polish toy guy. Welcome to my new video. I am a big fan of the manga Knights of Sidonia, created by Tsugumori, and probably like most of its fans in Poland, I am very happy that soon we will have our own official release of this series. I am mentioning this because today I will show you my very first action figure from the Figma line by Max Factory, and it represents none other than Tsugumori, the combat robot piloted by the franchise's main protagonist. Will this toy be helpful in coping with the comic book countdown, or simply allow fans to grow closer to the crew of the siege ship Sidonia? Let's find out! But first of all, I would like to thank the team of Hobbylink Japan for providing me with this review sample. And if you will find this toy to your liking, there's a direct link to Tsugumori on the HLJ website in the description. Like I said, this is the very first Figma in my collection, and it positively surprised me a few times even before I got to the figure itself. The first time was the inclusion of the official Figma zip bag for storing the accessories, or maybe even the whole figure away from the box. As a reviewer, I use these bags a lot, so I do appreciate getting one together with the toy. Another twist is that the instruction manual is printed both in Japanese and in English, with each side dedicated to one language. Seeing that nagging how Japanese toy makers rarely take gaijin collectors into consideration is becoming a hobby of mine, this was a great touch to see. And there are more to talk about, but the time for that is yet to come. Now let's talk about Tsugumori itself, the century-old Guarde Type 17 machine that influenced the fate of Sidonia many times throughout its ongoing struggle against the deadly Gauna aliens. Its newest pilot is Tanikaze Nagate, who spent almost whole life training on a simulator of this exact model, though his connection to Tsugumori is far more complicated. For now, all I can tell is that the designation on the robot's shoulders is Tanikaze's call sign after he's promoted to full pilot status. Anyway, in visual terms, Tsugumori is definitely interesting, but I will point out that it may not be a conventionally attractive robot. Its skinny armor is dominated by flat and edged surfaces and white-grey color scheme with a few touches of red. As a result, Tsugumori sports a rough, almost minimalistic design, clearly stating that its main function is not to look nice, but to grant its pilot victory. Or at least as long lifespan as possible on a battlefield crowded with really nasty enemies. And even though this will make Tsugumori stand apart from other Japanese robots in my collection, I really do like the way Nihei designed this machine. It seemingly differs from my other toys in terms of physical properties as well, as its plastic feels and touch as if all bright parts were slightly sanded. In terms of posability, Tsugumori has a few interesting things to offer, so let's look at that. Starting with the head, which is my preferred way. And honestly, the head might be a slight disappointment to some people because, as you can see, side-to-side motion is not very far. This is because we have a neck cover hidden here in front of the neck joint. As you can see, when we raise the head, it goes out, actually hiding the joint, which I do kind of like. This is an interesting solution. Not everyone will like it, but I don't mind, especially that, as you can see, Tsugumori can look up and down really well. Next, we have the more interesting thing, which I think is one of the more recognizable elements of the Figma joints. This is a structure that kind of works like a Revoltech joint, only without clicking, and because of my lighting it's very hard to see, so I actually tried to put some more light on it. Yeah, as you can see, that's the thing between the arm cover and the torso, and actually it's just one ball joint that's connected to a ball swivel and then ending in a single axis simple swivel. So the ball joint actually allows this kind of movement to the arm. The ball swivel allows this piece to move like so, or when we change the axis like so, and the swivel just improves this motion. We have another joint like that here in the arm, which is slightly more forward. It works the same way. The ball joint attaches to the arm guard, allowing us lots of wiggle in all directions. And the swivel is mostly for the sake of connection, because yes, we can spin this whole section 360 degrees like so, but it's mostly the doing of the ball joint over here. And down below we have the elbow, which actually has only one interesting joint, that is this swivel inside a hokey puck that goes 90 degrees. Again, these things above and beneath are mostly for connection, not as much in case of the wrist, which is, yes, only swivel joints, but one of them is a ball swivel, so at this end and at this end we can move these swivels like so, but depending on how we adjust the axis of the ball swivel, we can give the hand some extra movement, which is really nice. In terms of the torso, we can do something like this with the waist piece, though it's kind of limited by this thruster tail, which you can either detach if you want or save it for later when the engine is moved slightly into another place, but yeah, it has its own joint. And then we have some forward and backward motion in the upper part of the torso. I think it's just a simple swivel or a ball joint. It's hard to tell without taking Tsugumori apart. Also, we have this little flap moving, though it moves far more than it actually has to, as you can see. But yeah, another movable piece, separate piece, that's always a nice addition. And now we will take a look at something that is both interesting and very annoying to work with: the hips. And the hip joints work exactly the same way as the shoulder joints. We have a vertical swivel here connecting the leg to the crotch piece, a ball swivel over here for outside motion, and we have a ball joint connecting the whole thing to the leg, both for side to side motion and for moving the leg slightly away from the crotch to help us move the leg to the side or to back and front. And what does this do? As you can see, we can move the leg like so, if we do not bump into pieces, including this piece in the front and the thruster tail in the back. And we can also do something like this, but at all times we have to be alert because this hip cover is a big pain to deal with, because in my case it's so loosely attached that it falls off at the drop of the hat. La 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 la, see? It happened already, and it happens in the least appropriate moments, so it's really hard to deal with it because I don't want to glue it in place. I could, because it slots into this hole, but doing so will forever take away some extra things I can do when it's actually removed. For example, doing a full split, a far better motion forward and backward, better side to side motion. So yeah, this is a double-edged sword. It's technically good that it's there, but it can sometimes be really annoying to me, and yet when it's annoying to me, then I find some good things about it. So it's definitely the biggest flaw of the whole figure, and yet it's a somewhat exploitable flaw. Below that we also have the knee, which moves in one axis over 90 degrees, but the more interesting thing in this place is that we have two moving layers of armor. The first one is this grey knee cover bit, which moves like so, and then if you want you can also move this thicker outer thigh armor to get a segmented knee movement. It's really nice, it's completely unnecessary. I don't remember seeing this in either manga or the anime, but it looks really nice, and if you want you can have Tsugumori to move like this, or like so. You have basically three different styles of motion, and it's a really nice thing, and I think the posers, the people who like posing toys, will appreciate this. And below that we have only some movement in the foot, side to side just a bit, but enough to help us stabilize the more widespread positions. We have motion downwards, upwards, and absolutely nothing in the ankle. So as a whole, the posability of Tsugumori is kind of nice, at some points slightly annoying, but overall it's better than worse. The hands can be swapped out with other pairs included in the set, so instead of the pre-installed clenched fists we can also use open hands or two types of fists with different sized holes for weapon holding. And no, I have no idea why the fingertips are red, but without a doubt that little detail is easy to remember. We also get a dedicated Figma storage rack for the spare hands and one extra wrist joint. Talk about a subtle way for the toy maker to hint at what might break on his toy first. Another thumbs up for Max Factory is the inclusion of a display stand for support and aerial poses. It's your standard Figma make working a lot like Bandai's Tamashii stage family. We get a base, triple jointed arm and two adapter extensions tailored to Tsugumori's attachment point between its legs. And the stand's presence does miracles to the whole set's fun factor. Most of the time Tsugumori is seen fighting in space, so the option of displaying it on the shelf so that it doesn't touch the ground directly is a bullseye to me. And while we are on the topic of fighting in space, let's go back to the main engine block for a moment, as it has two modes. The one you've seen up until now is a local flight mode, but when Tanikaze needs to fly further away or at higher speed, the engine moves up on a dedicated hinge, plugging into the figure using its lower socket. Its tip also extends, in this case using a new piece. This is a simple but very effective transformation that not only greatly increases Tsugumori's optical size, but also makes it much more appealing when used in tandem with the stand. Tsugumori also possesses several weapons that help recreating various missions and scenes with Tanikaze in the spotlight, and it's about time we inspect them. First of all, no, that blue thing in the robot's head is not a lens of its main camera. It's part of the firing system for the Higgs particle cannon mounted there, and the second included head shows how that weapon looks when it's ready to shoot, still retaining all of its range of movement. It's a pity we do not get a beam effect for the cannon, but that would most likely require a third headpiece with the beam permanently attached. Now let's take a look at the Kabizashi, a special spear tipped with Kabi, the only known substance capable of destroying Gauna cores. I find it slightly ironic that it's attached to the spear using the very tissue of the said aliens. Plot-wise, Kabizashi is the key weapon of Tsugumori, but in my book it's also the weakest accessory in the whole set. Its plastic is so weak and fragile that you don't need a lot of force to break it apart, and it's no wonder that we get a second pair of holding fists with looser grip. I also don't like the color of the Ghana tissue as too human-like, but I like the added bonus of the aforementioned core even less, as A, it can be impaled on the spear, B, is even more human-like in color, and C, looks like a human brain with parts of spine attached. Seriously, the cores came in so many shapes in the manga and anime, why did they have to go for this one? For close-quarter weapons we also get energy-coated blades for repelling the incoming Gauna tentacles that make me think of pocket-sized razors on steroids. In story, they deploy from under the forearms, and in toy, they are attached using slits with pegs in the figure. To my surprise, this connection is not only very sturdy, but also simple to undo. We also get a small missile launcher underneath the right forearm, but that's really only a cover for a slot used by this weapon. A rectangular beam nearly as big as Tsugumori itself. The ballistic acceleration device, or in layman's terms, a railgun, at some point in the story becomes a standard issue gun for all Guardes that fire bullets made of artificial Kabi. And again, the connection with the figure is far more solid than it looks. I am happy that Max Factory went for the mass production version though. The previous Tsugumori iteration made by Sentinel for their Riobot line also included the extension modules for the ridiculously long-barreled prototype that was both difficult to display and drag the figure down unless it used its own support. Admittedly, this weapon is one of the least impressive firearms in my collection, but its installation adds some charm to the figure, and even people with no knowledge of Sidonia might figure out they are looking at a powerful gun. Just remember that the shoulder joint does not always want to withstand the gun's added weight, so sometimes you may want to support it with the other hand or rest its back on the engine block. The gun is also tied to another accessory which I am very happy to have on board. There's a certain battle in the Knights where there's still one more Gauna to defeat, but among the whole team of heroes there's only one Kabi bullet left. So, what does Tanikaze do when he receives it? Instead of wasting time loading it into his gun, he destroys the Gauna by firing the whole hand holding the bullet at it, and that's what this accessory represents. This was one of my favorite moments in the whole series, so I am very pleased it made it to this set. To sum it all up, Tsugumori is a very nice action figure and a great way to say hello to Figma. The build quality, wide range of motion and many fun-enhancing accessories all make a quite good impression on me, but I'm not saying this is a perfect figure. Some joints are loose right out of the box, and the falling off hip covers annoy me to no end, though I have a suspicion this is a fault in my piece rather than in the whole run of the toy. I'd also prefer the kabizashi to be made of a stronger plastic and the gaona core to have a less suggestive colour. But, despite these nitpicks, I still enjoyed Tsugumori as a whole and think both fans of Knights of Sidonia and Japanese robots in general will like this action figure. And that's all for this video review. I will be back with the next one soon. And until then, stay well.